Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here sharing with you some of the new thoughts that we have about creating new infrastructures that work for all of us so we can enable new economies as well. My name is Paola Santana, and I'm the founder and CEO of Glass and a co-founder of Matternet. Who has heard the word moonshot? Great. Who has not heard the word moonshot ever? Great. So I usually want to take these slides out of the deck, and then I'm like, no. I've been talking about this for 12 years, and I realize that some of us don't understand the nature of what moonshots are. And I want to anchor our conversation today around this core concept that allows us to create bigger things and bigger infrastructures. But why some say the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? We choose to go to the moon in this decade timeline and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win. That's John F. Kennedy's speech in front of Congress, 1962. So today we know John F. Kennedy was a visionary, and we know he was successful. In 1969, in that decade, we were able to get the Apollo 11 mission to the moon and back with humans alive. It wasn't the Apollo 1, or the Apollo 2, or the Apollo 3. It was the Apollo 11 mission. So can you imagine for a second this powerful figure saying something very publicly that we had never done before? Put yourself in those shoes for a minute. We had never done that. NASA was a startup, so it only had literally 4 years operating. We have never crafted a budget for hardware to do that, and software neither. So when we refer to moonshots, we're talking about innovative and hard ideas with an unclear implementation path, with unknown chances of success. And you might ask me, Paola, with all these challenges that moonshots have, what are they giving us? They give us a gift of growing as big as the idea that we are bringing to the world. And you end up operating beyond your bucket list. In Silicon Valley, we have this moonshot mindset. We build in public. We invest indiscriminately, knowing that we need to invest in a couple of things because maybe one of those things will come to life. We have skin in the game. So maybe, again, you don't know this, but NASA, founded in 1958, invested in a couple of solutions, in many at the same time, in the whole microchip industry that we are now taking advantage of for all these AI and machine learning applications. But not only NASA invested in most of the startups building these chips, including Fairchild Semiconductor, NASA then bought 70% of those chips. So when this common saying of that we have in our cell phones more computing power than the NASA rocket that took that mission to the moon, it is true. Because that chip and the screen that you use in your cell phone today and the windshields that we have in our cars, all of those are spin-offs of NASA trying to get us to the moon. We also know in Silicon Valley that execution is king. Don't tell me about your idea. Tell me, what have you built? And for an immigrant like me, coming to Silicon Valley, where are you coming from Harvard? Are you coming from the Dominican Republic? Are you coming from Washington, D.C.? That's great. But what have you built with all that knowledge? Have you moved the needle? And that conversation was so powerful for someone that wanted to see change happen in the world in my lifetime. I'm going to talk about 2 experiments. That's how I call my startups. Because I don't have fear to fail and to fail publicly. But the cool thing is that if I make it, I'm going to transform something dramatically. And this is something I would like to share with you, not just like how we made it, but the things that we've been learning along the way, and how you can take some of those learnings and apply them yesterday. So my first experiment is called Matternet. We were trying to create, 12 years ago, an internet of matter. Just like the internet, an infrastructure that would operate 24/7 in the background, but instead of moving bits of information, moving bits of atoms, little packages. Let me show you how that vision looked like. Initially for Matternet, that is today the world's first drone delivery operator and manufacturer in the world, we were looking at the first and last mile only. But over time, we started connecting the whole mile with fully autonomous transportation in partnership with a couple of other partners, like Mercedes-Benz. Back then, we were looking at 3 pieces of technology: drones. We understood that there was a drone that could carry a camera, and we were asking, can this drone carry a piece of payload, especially in places that are disconnected? The second piece of technology that we didn't know back then, it was called AI. It was this intelligent software. It would tell the drone where it was going, and craft a route that 80% would not go over people. So we would have a secure route in case something went wrong with this very early technology. And the third piece of technology, we still don't know how to call it. So the more we've unlocked layers building this infrastructure, there are things that we still don't know how to properly name them. These ground stations, they have a robotic arm. They can place a new battery in every drone, so they can go 20 kilometers at a time. And they also can place a new payload so they can carry what they're meant to carry. So we were looking initially at this problem. 1 billion people in the world is disconnected from their healthcare centers and their local markets. It was very hard to sell this vision, especially back in 2012, where probably 2 VCs, investors, would invest in hardware. So we went and followed the problem. Where were the places where, if we could place this drone delivery system, we could start being life-giving instead of life-taking? So we went to Bhutan, and we started connecting the healthcare system of small clinics with the main hospitals. Eventually, we went to Papua New Guinea with Doctors Without Borders and started moving medicine against tuberculosis. 3 years later, we started working with UNICEF in the first case of using drones for transportation in the country with the highest incidence of HIV, Malawi. So I mentioned 3 cases where we only did an improvement of 10%. It's what we call an MVP. That was all the money we had to do, and that's exactly what we did. We had these drones that were very rustic. We put them in the skies, hoping that they didn't fall, but we were able to showcase a vision that then turned into this. We started working with Swiss Airlines and Swiss Post. That black pad that you see there is the first version of the ground station. It was a secure place, a static, where the drone could take off and land securely. Eventually, we started integrating with Mercedes-Benz, so the pad became a warehouse that could move. And eventually, we came back home to the United States, where we worked with the White House, Congress, NASA, and FAA to pass the first drone regulation back in 2016. We couldn't fly drones before that. So between the first version of the drone in Bhutan and this version of the drone, we had a 10x leapfrog. And that's how we started operating at the moonshot level. That was the original vision that we had. But that, again, is not how we started. I'm going to show you the whole vision right now. That's a moonshot 12 years in the making. Today, we can connect our healthcare infrastructure with fully autonomous drone technology and drone infrastructure that is a fraction of the cost of building infrastructure, building roads that cost $1 million for 1 kilometer of road in the developing world. So, I'm a lawyer. I'm specialized in public sector. I'm a Fulbright scholar. I went to Washington, D.C. to discover the future of governments. I didn't find the future of governments and of public sector in Washington, D.C. I did a step back, came to Silicon Valley, and discovered how to build technology so I could build the things that we were talking about. So with Matternet, I learned how to build technology with my first experiment. But with glass, I reaffirmed why I was learning to build technology. Governments are the biggest decision makers in the world, determining the way we live and the opportunities that we have to thrive. From the first mission that helped us do a space exploration, to hardcore science that has provided the initial indications that the universe is expanding, to handling a global pandemic, from access to healthcare, to access to education and opportunities to thrive, governments determine our day-to-day, but they don't work for all of us. Very especially because governments are the largest purchasers in the world. Maybe you don't know this, but they spend $16 trillion in annual public purchases. And this $16 trillion, this massive industry, is funneled through paper-based, fragmented, obsolete, and slow processes and software. We started looking at the problem, trying to understand the low-hanging fruit, and we discovered that the small purchases, a small government purchase is a purchase under $25,000 done with a government credit card. These small purchases are an overlooked problem, and they take the same amount of time, training, people, and paperwork than a big purchase. So the question we started asking and the data we started observing is, what happens if we canalize 30% of our daily purchases, not to the same players of every day, but what if we give the small purchases to the small businesses? So simple. What if we give 30% of our GDPs to 400 million small, local, diverse, and emerging businesses that are the one powering our local economies and are the foundation of our country's economies? So we're revolutionizing how governments buy. This is a type of digital infrastructure, contrary to Matternet, that is physical infrastructure, and we're doing that with glass commerce. We're enabling this local government marketplace that allows anybody in government to not be trained and to not know what they need to do, but they come to one single place and they can search for goods, services, rental, software, consulting services, add to cart, and check out. The main call to action is to search, sort, verify the vendor. We check all these databases to make sure that any vendor can become a government vendor without having to comply with a lot of requirements because it's not a contract, it's a small purchase. And they can check out paying with their government credit card, a government check, or other payment instruments. And they're done. I think this is the most important part of the whole system. You cannot change what you cannot see. Governments don't have access in real time to their data. They cannot measure the impact of the things that they're doing with their day-to-day decisions. So this technology infrastructure for government is helping us transform public purchases into activities that provide very high public value. We are redefining what public means. How can it be that in Dominican Republic, I take a public bus that is a Mercedes-Benz public bus, but I don't feel it's Mercedes-Benz? What's happening there? We want to maximize public budgets, and at the end of the day, we want to simplify the work that public servants do, so doing the right thing is the simple thing. This is an untapped market, so these little purchases are a $4 trillion market. We're only starting in the United States, where cities are making purchases up to $100 billion on their day-to-day. We have worked with the city of Seattle, the city of Oakley, over 45 other government entities at the federal, state, and local level. And while many investors, not One Planet Group, were saying no, we were transacting over $4 million in government orders and canalizing them to hundreds of small businesses. This is probably the most important slide that I have today in this presentation. We really believe in doing good and doing well at the same time. So we are unlocking this triple impact and unlocking a $3.7 trillion local economy that, according to Bloomberg, 5 years later, today is a no-brainer. We are canalizing small purchases to small businesses, matching local demand with local supply, and making national dollars work for national jobs. But the real breakthrough here is the power of our government's procurement. They're not only executing public policy and closing the digital gap, but we're helping every business in the United States to create their first government online store. So out of the $4 million that have been transacted in the platform that no government was going to use, more than half of that, 2.3 million, have been directed towards 128 small businesses that had never done business with government before. So that is the power of introducing all of us into the economy that all of us helped create. I'm going to close with the learnings of these two experiments that I really hope you can take one line and apply it today. Before you get a big disruption on a new technology platform or a big project or a moonshot project, you're going to need to have to improve or enable new user experiences or interfaces, things that make activities to be easier. You're going to have to come up with new risk and financial models. That's what our MBAs should be thinking about. We will create new technical careers, and we will have new regulation enabled. The business models of the future, they're super counterintuitive. They should follow the problem. Value is not necessarily money. The user is not necessarily the client, and we need to focus on the early adopters, the ones that need this so much that are willing to take the risk of something going wrong. This is what we proved with UNICEF. Two quick things about UNICEF. When we worked with them, they had unlocked two breakthroughs. Number one, they had developed a drug that prevented a mother to pass on HIV to a newborn. But in the cases that HIV was passed to the newborn, they developed another antiretroviral. They would put the newborn for 8 weeks straight in an antiretroviral treatment. This newborn would never develop HIV. When you do something like that in the country with the highest incidence of HIV, you're like, I'm in, how can I help? They had a little problem. They had to develop the antiretrovirals for 8 weeks straight, and these antiretrovirals needed to be refrigerated. These mothers didn't have electricity, and they didn't have roads to deliver the antiretrovirals. They call us, and we're like, let's try it. Do we have regulation? No. Do we have electricity? No. What do we have? A need. What's your budget? $4 million. So the NGO working in the poor country is the original user and the early adopter of a technology that all of us today are benefiting from. That doing good ended up in doing well, because Matternet today is a company valued at over $220 million. The second example is with procurement. In the 5 years that we've been checking this early data, we have seen that every time we buy something locally from a small business and we connect a small business with a small purchase from government, we are finding prices up to between 15 to 33% off for that government entity. And what is more disruptive, and maybe you have heard about this, it takes a long time for a government entity to put a contract in place, a competitively awarded contract. When we do these same purchases in real time, these small businesses that have no sophistication, that do not know a lot about government pricing, are beating the competitively awarded price from a big box retailer. I don't know what we can do with 30% more budget in our public sector. And then Bloomberg picks up and says, this is a no-brainer, let's do it. I just want to remind you to take advantage of exponential technologies, AI, machine learning, big data, drones, and robotics. They will accelerate any vision that you have. For us to leapfrog, we need to go from linear to exponential. Think 30 pages to one page to a click. Remove the one page and go from 30 pages to one click. How can you do that in any project or any idea that you're doing today? Dare to think differently. Contradict yourself. So by the time someone contradicts you or is not in agreement with you, you're like, I know, I might be wrong. Eliminate the fear. How? Failing publicly. If you're failing publicly, you already know what you're doing wrong, and it's okay. And I honestly believe that the world belongs to the people that follows up. So don't give up on your vision. You have to insist it's your vision to bring to the world. Hacks in Silicon Valley, more observation, less processes, more failures. Fail fast, fail often. That's our culture. And timing. By the time that you feel ready, you're already late because you're in your brain, you're in your slide deck, you're in your computer making this beautiful plan that, again, you need to put out in the world. The first version of your idea is never the best version of your idea. So you need to start. Secrets. Mindshare. You need to have a reality distortion field. You need to be surrounded by people that say, I don't know how you're going to get this done, but here's a check, here's a contact, here's someone that you should talk to. This culture of yes and, not the culture of you can't, you don't know, you didn't study this, we don't know how, this has never been done before. That doesn't build the world up. The MVP will be horrible. So that version of the drone flying in Bhutan, if you know it's going to be horrible, nobody needs to tell you. You already know it's going to be horrible, so you need to get started. And an overnight success takes 10 years. So if it's going to take 10 years, you better start yesterday, right? I think that I want to finish with this. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. Too much effort there. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. The best moment to start anything big is now. The best idea is the one that gets executed. And to the bold pioneers that are sitting in this audience, I look forward to seeing what you've built in 10 years. Thank you.
Think of sharing what you know.